Dokie, today is 13 September. As, as we're watching, we have two things, several things. One of them is, well, we have three things to cover. One is HB40, other is Joe, the other is something Senator Graham said, and then the other is defense oversight with Senator Romney and Senator Kinzinger. Please pardon if I missaid that. Let's start first with what Joe's talking about. Joe's saying 1.5 trillion is his counteroffer on the 3.5, and his main concerns are 37% capital gains. Short-term capital gains is what he's talking about. And what is short-term capital gains? That's Well, first off, what is capital gains? What are capital gains? Capital gains are, say, for instance, you have a lemonade stand, and well, actually, your buddy wants to open up a lemonade stand. He goes, "Hey, dude, I want to borrow $10 from you." And you're like, "Okay, dude, here's $10. I want $11 back by Friday." That's short. And he goes back and goes, "Hey, dude, well, what about can I hold it till Monday? I mean, till not till Monday, until the end of the month." Okay, I'm going to charge you. I want 11.50 back by the end of the month. So the end of the month would be the 11.50 or the $1.50 you get back off the $10 at the end of the month would be considered long-term capital gains. The a dollar you get back, or actually probably would be more like, you know, just for easy numbers, it'd be something a lot different, a little bit different. It would be that you get for the end of the week would be short-term capital gains. Capital gains is the money you get back. You make an investment, you get, and the longer you hold that investment out, the lower your taxes are. Tend to tend to be. Let me get this out of there. There we go. This is where. So so for instance here, that's where we're talking about what he means by capital gains, long-term and short-term capital gains. Here's the thing about capital gains, where because it's considered ordinary income. When you're, say, for instance, you're say you made some money off of Robinhood, you held it only for a month or for that day or something, a stock or something. That's short-term capital gains because you held it less than a month. That's considered general income, and you're going to get taxed at that at your regular taxable income, your the amount. So if you made only, I know this guy, he said he made 16 grand. Well, then he's going to get taxed on that at whatever 16 grand is for regular income, and then it goes up from there because he held it. It was, well, it's, I think he got out of it. So that's short-term capital gains. That's your taxes you're going to have to pay on that, and it suggests that you do make sure you have that set aside, and as you go through, might want to take an H&R block or what is it? One of the tax things, tax preparers. They give these courses. You can go take one of those. Jackson Hewitt's the other one. So you have a better understanding of how to look at those taxes and do your own, and then or ask better questions when you give it off to your CPA as your tax as you have more capital to use. Now, the other thing Joe said was about corporations at 25% with a 15% floor on as far as paying their fair share of taxes, especially on the ultra wealthy, where these taxes are coming out, and then they're using different shenanigans that I know to either through charitable giving, things like that. There's a lot of ways of just lowering your tax rate, and so they're going to use and that's what they're saying, trying to close up loopholes, getting all these things. So basically, in the end, the assumption is going to be we'll get 15% out of the total production of taxes for the entire for the entire GDP. Because right now we're getting far less. As the president said, the top 50 companies in the country have paid zero in taxes, or we've paid them for existing. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. And so that's a these are very good necessary concerns. My personal thing is with the short-term capital gains, it being taxed at ordinary income personally is, yeah, whatever. But what you can do is, if they do what's called an exchange, so you make so what that so let's talk take back to that dude. He made 16K apparently off his Robinhood account. All right, he's gonna have to pay. He's probably gonna have to pay 15% or well, that's wrong. It's long term. Yeah, probably let's say 10 to 22% or 12. Let's say he's going to do 12% on that 16K, which is around 16 6 6 1,600. Actually, a little more than that, 1,008. But anyways, he's going to pay that in taxes. However, if he takes that money or part and then reinvest it into what's called a long-term capital gains. So now he takes the money he made off of short term, he made it in a month. He designates that on his taxes and goes, I have going to take this capital, I'm putting it to a long term hold. So maybe he sees a stock or a dividend paying stock he likes, or he or she likes, and he places it into that. That's called an exchange. Now, it gets more complicated than that, but it's just trying to keep it simple. Now, that's going to lower his tax rate. And the reason you have the higher short-term capital gains. So what should really happen as far as lowering your taxable income is, I can make all this short-term capital, and instead of living off of it, I'm taking that capital and putting it back into the economy for a longer term. I'm going to and for that longer term of risk, we the people, the government, is going to lower your taxes because that capital is being used in productive society. So so understand that when they're talking about capital gains, i.e., profits. Another thing he said is, okay, big energy would rather have, they said we're good to go, we can make this happen. Okay, no problems. So they'd rather not have the capital. That's one of the reasons that Joe said 1.5, because that's more of the short term. We're looking 1 to 2 years. Business persons are looking at it. Big energy is like, well, that's cool, but we are our budgets and stuff are built out to 5 and 10 year plans. Okay, well, then we need them. They say they can get it by 2030. They can reach the targets by 2030. Well, how do we incentivize them to make sure that those targets are actually reached and met? One of the ways we can do that is through the tax code, and that's not a fair tax code. And we use and say, okay, you train your workers, or you give them incentives, or say, okay, you go to community college, you get this thing, we'll give you a bump up in your pay. So that first year of worker training is reduces their taxes. And say first, if it's because they're going to raise their workers' wages, so it takes about 6 to 8 months for you for when a worker goes into a new category, it takes about 3 to 6 months for the company to actually start making profits, to become break even, past break even, and profitable off of you gaining that new position. You're actually costing the company until you get up to speed. So we offset that by giving companies a tax break on retraining their workers And because the risk is because they're taking on this risk as their workers are up in their skill level, so to speak. So we can use to the tax code to incentivize companies to reinvest in R&D, research and development, and incentivize to to retrain their workers, even if they send them to a local community college. That worker comes in with a new certificate. Now they're moved up. They get paid more money. Well, we're gonna give them an incentive to pay to actually start paying that worker more as they're waiting for that worker to start creating more capital for them. So that's how we're going to use the tax code to help incentivize, quote, force not, these companies to do that Green New Deal transition, and at the same time incentivize, because right now we have a lot of workers going back to school, apparently, according to T-Bill of T-Bill's podcast, who are now using that capital to this time to retool and their own selves to get their own selves going. But now, if we say workers, we do that with the companies. It's more there's a continuous incentive for continuing education and keeping up with the pace of innovation that's coming through. That's that, and that would also that would, I'm and then another thing Joe said was the debt at 28.7 trillion. I totally agree with him. That needs to be paid down. Even though modern monetary theory says that just there's most things we have to worry about is inflation, which yeah, I'm good with that. But there's a psychology of this. Early thousands, even if so, some people will say that it was just shenanigans. Numbers with CBO still stated there was a surplus, and then we blew that surplus over the last 22 years. And but the thing is, it also what we do with our government is what we also tend to do with ourselves, and that's not good. Some now from some perspectives, from your top-down perspectives, oh, keep them running. You know, you put them in debt, keep them running faster, trying to catch up. It's stratifying society far too deep, personally, and that creates more problems. It makes it makes a desperate population. And when you're way up there, you don't really you get used to seeing the homeless or whatever. You don't realize the damage this is doing to the lower stratifications of society, which means it's doing a lot more damage to even the middle and upper stratifications. And that's why they're well, we're making all this money. Well, it's not. What's the use of making a lot of money if you have to live inside of a castle? And that's what happens in a lot of these other countries. They squeeze all the people down low, and then they're rich, and then you're stuck living in gated communities, having to have, and I'm not gated, I should say walled communities, have to have your own private security. What's the use of being rich if you can't frickin' just go do what you want to do? And so because now you're rich, but you're not wealthy, and that's not cool. Personally, it's no fun. What's why would you? What's the use of making all the money to live inside of basically a jail of your own creation, or a prison of your own creation? Okay, so the next thing is thinking through this. I was thinking through this. I'm like, okay, how do we look at this in because one of the things Joe was saying is they want a competitive tax rate globally. Well, we know that the president has said, okay, we'll do a 15% floor. Has gotten a lot of the Western countries to say 15%, which is a steal because Putin takes 20 plus another plus whatever taxes that go to the state. So if we become authoritarian, we're actually it's a much better deal than being turning into an authoritarian country. And and so So when we're looking at this, so Bernie's on the budget committee, or the chairman of the budget committee. What we need now, usually they'll put these numbers out, and it's all gobbledygook. If you have a high school education, it's just like beep. So what we need to know is, okay, we need three different CBO numbers, Congressional Budget Office. What would the situation look right now with the tax system at the way it is currently, which is basically large corporations, 50 and super wealthy individuals we're paying them to exist in the country, basically. So we want that at today's tax rate, one set of numbers at today's tax rate, another set of numbers at 10%. Originally I was going to do 7.5, but I think at 10% is more realistic. 10%, only taking taxes off 10%. Why 10%? Because after all the shenanigans are done, probably only get 10%. And it's also better to do the numbers below what you think you can get than to do it with than to run your numbers at what you're trying to get. Then run another set of numbers at or between 7.5 and 10%. Let's say we'll stick with 10%. Easier to do the numbers, the math. And then a third at 10% plus. So maybe we get that 15%. What do you do with that 10 to 15% capital? So what that means is, we should get back from the CBO. The bean counter should say, here we are. This is do everything you want to do. Blah blah blah. This is the pie in the sky with today's number. Okay. Then you do pie in the sky with 10% because we're having a 15% floor. Then you do pie in the sky with 10% plus a 5% slush. So you're still taking your 10% numbers. You don't change it, but you then look at that 5% of, okay, well, we got a 5% surplus. What do we do with that? And in all of those, we should still be paying down the debt at the same time so that we have a buffer in case something happens. Because if something happens and everything closes down, it's harder to be able to sell that debt off and to create new capital when you don't have, you can't, if you get, as you well know, it's easy to get money when you don't need it, but when you need it, it's it's daggum near impossible. So, so it's better to have the money now and being put into practical use than to try to get it when something happens. And then and explain that way, then other than the American people start working that way as well, and that increases prosperity. This whole keeping we've done this for 22 years. We had a great budget surplus. We took it, blew it, and everyone's running themselves in the ground. They don't understand why they're not getting anywhere. And the economists are going to say this or that. Yeah, that's nice. Psychologically, it's really not getting anywhere because, well, the banks are getting their spread. As long as they get their 3% spread or 4% spread on that money, it doesn't matter. The workers can keep running themselves in the ground. That's going to lead to pitchforks. We need to slow it down a bit, pay off our debt. We can still use modern monetary systems, but the psychology of having a lower debt and pulling that debt helps other people think, helps us as a country think in a way that's good for pocketbooks because the average person just can't go out and print money. They got to work for it. So if using both systems, one is the PhDs and they're running numbers 16 different ways a Sunday, and then the human beings who just basically, if I do this, I get to this. Those are the two ways we have to look at it. And another thing, which is I thought was really good actually, if Joe's 1.5, well, right now rolling through is HB40, as I was notified. Mary Trump in her book made a point, and it is actual reparations. It is a true reparations bill. I have not read it yet, so I do not know what's in it. I will do so sometime in the next week or so. And if so, we could take apart that bill and look at saying, okay, how do we then take that bill or the funding of that bill, if it's a good bill? I haven't looked at it. I'm assuming it is right now. I might read it and go, that bill. So it's all depends. Then how do we? Then could we put it into that 3.5 trillion, if it's possible, depending on what the bill looks like. So him not so So Joe and his donors stating that they don't want to do 3.5, and it's a good point, and we shouldn't rush it too. There's another reason we shouldn't rush it is if we have to make the borrowing right now, inflation's going up, but we're expecting it as from Meet Kevin, as he showed off his Bloomberg terminal, the inflationary pressure will come down, is expected to come down dramatically back to its 1 to 2% normalcy in early Q1, late Q1, Q2 of next year, quarter one, quarter two, which is January, March, between spring and summer of next year, in and around the latest, and then continue on its normal 1 to 2 projection. And the Fed has already stated if we have the understanding of what's going on, we can taper the number down to 1%. If we don't know, the more uncertainty Congress gives the Fed, the higher that number is. So we want to give Congress the Fed the certainty of what Congress is going to do, so they can start that tapering and get us down to 1% at 3.5 trillion. So our borrowing costs are extremely low. Plus, we're pulling capital in, so we have a good spread. So what I mean by spread is, so if we get 10% in taxes, our borrowing cost is at 1%. So we have 14, so we have a 9% spread. And this is very simplistic. I know the math. So the finance majors, suck it. This ain't for you. the the then So we have our 9% spread, and then we have another spread of paying back our our um, our debt, paying the principal on that debt, paying it back down, getting it down. Even if we're down to 15 trillion, it gives us a nice buffer for, say, something else happens, because you never know what's coming down the road. And two, the psychology of paying down your debt is going to get people to start, the average person, oh, I got to get my debt down, because everyone's getting their debt down. Then we're back, and then once our debt's down, then we can expand back out about a bit. But all this whole thing of just blowing through the debt, and then all that matters is the spread, because that's what happened. All that money went to big corporations. It didn't go to the average person. That's why you see so many daggum homeless people all over the place. And we as a country can grow better. At least that's my hypothesis. And now the FUDs are going to argue that all day long. That's why it's there, for that argument. Let that argument begin. Okay, there was a surplus. That's got done. And okay, now, so what we went over, 1 point, Joe's the counter offer, which is on capital gains, the debt, a competitive tax rate. He wants 25% at the top. I think 28. We'll start with 30. Let the negotiations begin. Use the taxes to advance the Green New Deal, so that way there's research, there's money funneling R&D, and to labor constantly upgrading their and being paid for upgrading their skill sets. HB40 reparations for theft of land, and other things. I assume it has to be land. I don't know the rest. Now here's one that now we're going to get into the what I stated about what is it called? Oh yeah, why the former president of the United States and Mitch McConnell are in contempt, well, of Congress, and then the former president is in breach of Congress. Lindsey Graham said an interesting thing on Fox News, and it is something that should never be said ever by a representative of the United representative of the people to United States Congress. He said he was afraid of Joe Biden, i.e., I'm afraid of the president. The good people of South Kakalaki did not put a stick up Lindsey Graham's buttocks to be afraid of the president. They put a stick up Lindsey Graham's buttocks so that way he can take that stick and stick it up the president's buttocks. That's so if he's afraid of the president, that means he's not doing what the people of South Kakalaki, better known as South Carolina, wanted him to do. So that means also implied he knows what happened that the president stepped foot onto the floor of Congress without a or his agent and without authorization. Now, how do you prove that it's it was an agent or they were thinking and they were acting in agency to the former president when they stepped foot on the Capitol? They'll tell you. That's why there has to be impeachment and it has to be this has to be pressed because it creates the legal precedent has to be broken. Now you're going to have a lot of lawyers who said, "Well, I went to school." I don't care. The Constitution and the system was set up so easily so in a person, an average high schooler during or whatever during 1776, which is 50% women were educated, 80% of the men could read and write. The that they can understand what's going on. And you also have to look at the time period. You had the French Revolution going on at the time. They stormed the Bastille. So everyone knows, dudes storming the Capitol, that means they're trying to overthrow the country. It's fairly simple. We have, if you look at what's going on, okay, we look at what we have as far as how we do things. Every year, State of the Union, president comes over, he sits at the door, big thing, Madam Speaker, Madam or Mr. Speaker, I present to you the President of the United States. He's presenting the executive of the United States to the people of the United States. And the executive then has to tell the people how's it been going and what's he been up to. Simple terms. And so everything else comes from that every all the complexity that all the lawyers and everything study comes from those simple things. The executive is trying to snag as much power from the legislative. The legislative snags as much power from the executive. The judiciary is the umpire. That's why Mitch McConnell was stuffing the judiciary with as many Heritage Foundation, which is and theocratic type persons as he possibly could. Because now, so now the if you're playing baseball, or use a baseball metaphor, the strike zone changes depending on which side. We try to say it's fair, but we know they're still human beings, as you can see with what happened in Texas and the abortion rights. I'm not saying either. I'm not going to say which way I go on that. It's just looking at the structure of how this was done. That's exactly what happened. Now, could that type of structure be repeated for other social things that you may or may not agree with? Absolutely. That's why the purpose. That's why Mitch McConnell is so forceful about getting these judges in to change the umpires essentially, rig the game. So that's why when 45 would say it's rigged, what he's really saying is it's supposed to be rigged and you shouldn't lose because it's supposed to be rigged. Get it? This is double speak. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. I decided to go to D.C. for the heck of it to go redress a grievance to ask my representative. Granted, I'm not going to actually ask my representative. I did send we'll be sending a letter through their portal, which my representative happens to be Bobert, and then Go figure, ain't that some funniness? And then my two senators on, I'm going to ask to redress that the president has too much power, and that my representative vote to impeach. And then I'm going to ask my two senators once it's the same thing. The president has too much power. Well, first off, that Mitch McConnell. First off, the impeachment starts in the House, so I will be asking that Mitch McConnell did not do his constitutional duty of holding the former president to task for allowing him to, because he allowed the president to step foot onto the floor of Congress and did not formally and forcefully rebuke him via precedent and law. He just sat there and said some babbly goop and said, well, he has legal. No, that's not their purpose. Congress's purpose and jurisdiction is especially is to hold the president to an account. It's not the judiciary's. It's not their purpose. That's why Congress gave away their power. It is up to Congress to hold the president to task. So I'll be asked. So I'll be placing that in first with my representative, and then with my two senators, and I'll be doing that through their portal. I've already written it up, and it'll go in later this afternoon. And because I'm going to go walk down there, because last time I was in D.C., it was for work. It's kind of neat, going, seeing the Washington Monument. And the last time I saw the Washington Monument it was years ago, and we were flying over it, so it's kind of cool. And that's it. But you need to keep pressure on your congressional, on your congresspersons to get voting rights through. They also, that's the thing. They're apparently voting rights is going to be put to the floor this week. That's the main reason I actually came. And you need to get you need to call or whatever if anyone's even listening to this. So I think, because personally, I think I'm just a madman shaking my fist at the wind. But somebody said somebody apparently is listening, I guess. You still need to call, and every day call your senator, call your representative, call your senator, or go to their website. I have a redress of grievance. I believe my voting rights are being stolen. Then I have a redress of grievance. I believe the president of the United States has too much power because the last president of the United States was allowed to step foot onto Congress. And you'll say, well, those were just his people. That's what it means by agents. If someone is working an agency for you, they are essentially your representatives. So that agent is you technically. So that's need to keep doing this. Need to keep putting pressure on. This is the most important time. I do not do hyperbole. I'm not a person who's gonna like, dude, look at me. Nah, that's not my. That's definitely not my style. This truly is a constitutional crisis, and you have to stand. If we do not stand right now, we are far. The rest of the world realizes when you're in something. Sometimes you don't realize how close things are. But those on the outside looking in go, they can see it. Because also, if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So they feel it and they see it. And when you start looking at around, you see what's up. You know. So it's very important we the people regain our power over the president. And if you want to do some research, one of the things you probably want to check out is when was the last time Joe Biden, he went over to the Senate I guess a couple months ago or so. And they gave him a standing ovation because he, basically he's one of their own. He went over, hung out with the Democrats. Now, look at the House rules. Was he, did he get permission, or was permission only needed if he goes all the way to the Senate floor or the House floor? These, because either way, that's what we need to know. Because if that, or did he just waltz all over, take a walk over to Congress and just hung out? If he did, that might be just some political theater to inform us. Because remember, Joe Biden's was in the Senate for 36 years. He knows those rules. He understands them thoroughly, and that's called political theater. I'm going to go walk on down to the Congress. Especially, the rules. Why, you know that the rules were breached. Why not hang out? Understand. So, history still calls in you. So far, the youth have answered in ways that have not kind of. We need you to keep answering. Voting rights will make it easier for you to vote, for you to do the things you want to do, for you to build your communities. Another thing you got to watch out for is local elections, the school board meetings, your city hall, your mayor's races. When you get your when you have voting that actually sent to you by mail, it's far easier to keep track of those things. See, a lot of the suppression is so that you don't ever know what's really going on and that you're staying confused. That's done to you on purpose. Getting these, not just the John Lewis bill, but the For the People Act and the John Lewis bill through, gives you the ability to have your voting, do it at your own spot, drive-in voting. You get your ballot. It's definitely sent to you. So that's why they're all worried about the whole signature thing and all this, because they want to do voter suppression, and they can't do voter suppression if they already know that you're already supposed to get your stuff, and that drives them bonkers. That drives people who are nefarious and think you don't have any rights and you're too stupid. That drives them bonkers. So this is where we're at. Hope you have a great day, and yeah. So once again, yeah, just watch, listen to it, and let the that was another thing. I almost forgot something. Defense oversight. Romney and Adam Kinzinger stating they needed DoD oversight on the pullout of Afghanistan, which I completely agree with. What happened? Why did what happened happen? And all this, and a committee. I agree. However, we can't get anything done on Jan 6, about Jan 6. Now it looks like old Romney may be still trying to angle in to get one more shot at being the president. Let's see if he can get us something about Jan 6 that's actually real. Or if not Jan 6, something else. Where normally I would totally agree, and I still agree, we need those answers of what happened in Afghanistan. But if we're going to get a commission that he can use, that he will use as a political, partially as political and partially as to do his oversight, we need something. And even though I want that, even though and every vet wants that. Any person who's ever served wants to know what the heck happened, and we need that. But at the same time, can't just give somebody, hey, here's the baseball bat that cracked me over the head. Nah, we gotta mitigate some of that, because we didn't. The Republicans have not shown up. There've not been Republicans. They've lost their blinkety blank marbles. So that was the last thing I needed to go over. All right, have a great day, and may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.